part of addressing these problems is first acknowledging that they are a problem. Um, we've seen a lot of climate denial, and it honestly gets us nowhere, and it hurts more than it helps. So acknowledging the fact that these are problems that are related to climate change and that um, are impacted by the ways in which we consume, the ways in which we produce, the rates at which we do those things. And then I believe a big part of the solution is looking to Indigenous folks who have been stewards of the land before us and will continue to be for honestly ever, and looking to the ways in which they have practice and cultivation and practice kind of just maintenance of the land and going back to that versus like trying to move towards more production, more consumption, which is hurting more than it's helping. And then also just when it comes to our governments, I would definitely love for them to start honoring Indigenous communities more and recognizing the value and a lot of the knowledge that comes from there and starting to practice that. But then also just like, there are other kind of solutions that have been proposed, from the Green New Deal to the Red Deal to obviously the US is not signed on to the Paris Agreement, like things like that that also can have a positive impact on our environment if we utilize them. We all have this like common goal of like climate justice, or of just like improving the conditions in which you're living in. But then obviously like it looks different from the different places that we're coming from. Like it looks different to be affected by climate in the US than it does to be affected by climate in like India. And I think there's so much separation from our problems from everybody else's problems that we need to find more, I think, common ground and more unity and more recognition of the fact that like we're all affected, and like even though some places might be experiencing it sooner and some places might be experiencing it later, we're all going to experience it at some point. And so if everybody could start taking part in being a part of the solution, if everybody could like I always go back to Indigenous knowledge and like looking at that, because obviously what is needed to maintain the land in the US is not going to be the same as in a different country or even different parts of the US. So like leaning more into Indigenous knowledge in our own communities and looking at that on a global scale and saying like, okay, like we have different problems that require different solutions, but ultimately the root of all these problems are the same. And so like working to address that collectively is important. I think that the opportunity that we've seen from COVID-19 leading into kind of the future, hopefully removed from COVID-19, just shows us the power of urgency, and shows us also like that the solutions that I think a lot of times we hear are unreasonable or just like can't happen in such a short time frame can happen. And, we constantly are talking about it being a climate emergency, but I don't think a lot of people are understanding that emergency part of it, or the urgency part of the emergency. And so I think COVID really helped to show what it looks like when people really do rally behind an emergency and rally behind a common cause. And so taking that energy and bringing that into the climate space, I think it's going to be really important.